My name is Rick Halverson. At exactly 3:07 a.m., on the 14th floor of a Honolulu hotel, my stepson kicked my door so hard it blew inward. A moment later, my wife stepped over the shattered wood and spoke in a hushed voice, as if I were the problem. Just give him what he wants. I froze not out of fear. Evan Mercer wasn't in. He was 28, loud and reckless, not dangerous. What stopped me was the sound of that door giving way. It wasn't only wood splintering. It felt like a line snapping, a boundary I'd spent years trying to hold straight in a marriage that constantly pushed it to bend. The hallway was silent in that uniquely hotel-way thick carpet swallowing sound, air conditioning whispering overhead, an elevator humming somewhere far off. Then Evan shattered it with alcohol-soaked breath and fury. "I want that room now," he yelled, as though he owned the entire floor. He wore board shorts and a flimsy black tank top straight from a souvenir shop. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair sticking up like he'd just rolled out of bed, though I knew he hadn't slept. The smell hit me immediately, beer mixed with something sweet, sharpened by tequila. That smell announces trouble before a word is spoken. Linda stood behind him, barefoot, wrapped in a robe, her hair twisted into a careless knot. Her expression was tight, exhausted, irritated in. That irritation was aimed at me, not him. "Rick," she said, using the voice she reserved for getting what she wanted without admitting she wanted anything. "Don't make this worse. Just switch rooms. He's upset. It's upset." As if a grown man kicking down a door before dawn was just an emotional moment. I looked at her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Instead, she stared at the busted latch, already calculating how to explain it to hotel staff. Evan jabbed a finger past me toward the king bed near the window. The curtains were half open, Honolulu glowing outside streetlights sliding past. Moving cars, the dark ocean stretched beyond. It was supposed to be romantic. Instead, it felt like a stage built for humiliation. "That one?" Evan said. "That's the room I'm taking?" "This is our room," I replied. My own voice sounded unfamiliar, flat, calm, distant, like I was hearing myself from across the space. Evan's lips curled. "Not anymore." Linda finally looked at me. Her eyes carried that familiar blend of pressure and pity. The look that meant be the bigger man, be the adult, pay the price so we can all keep pretending. "Rick," she said again, softer now. "You know he's been having a hard time. Don't be selfish over a bed." Selfish. The word struck hard because this had never been about a bed. It was about everything I'd swallowed for years. The plane tickets, the rent, the temporary loans Evan never repaid, the endless excuses Linda made for his behavior. Somehow, I was always expected to absorb the damage. I said nothing. I stood there in a t-shirt and pajama shorts, cool air brushing my legs. The floor steady beneath me while everything else shifted. Down the hall, a door opened. A man peeked out, eyes narrowed, then vanished again. A lock clicked. No one wanted involvement. I looked at the wrecked frame. The latch area was split clean, a thin strip of oak hanging loose like a tooth about to fall. The door sagged, hinges groaning under its weight. Without trying, my mind slipped into familiar mode, cataloging details, property damage, forced entry, liability, not a noise complaint. If security came, there'd be an incident report. Names logged, cameras reviewed. They always check cameras. I'd spent 3 decades reading fine print from disasters people insisted weren't their fault: hurricanes, fires, slip and emotion never mattered. Documentation did. I crossed to the dresser, opened the top drawer, and took out my small black notebook. Pocket-sized, I'd carried one like it since the 1980s. Ever since my first supervisor drilled into me the value of writing things down immediately. I clicked my old silver Parker pen, the one my father gave me when I was promoted, and wrote, 3:07 a.m. Evan kicked door and demanded room. Linda present. Evan blinked. "What are you doing?" "Recording," I said. Linda frowned. "Rick, don't do that. Come on." She hated this version of me, the quiet, procedural one. She preferred emotions she could steer. Silence was a wall she couldn't scale. Evan stepped closer, puffing out his chest. "Move. I'm taking it." I studied him. I imagined grabbing his collar, shoving him back into the hall. I imagined raising my voice, letting the entire floor hear how absurd this was. It would have felt good for maybe 10 seconds. Then I thought about the cameras, about how fast a man my age becomes the villain without proof, how Linda would retell it later, how Evan would claim I attacked him, how truth blurs once it has to pass through mouths like theirs. So I stepped back, not in surrender, but in exit. "Fine," I said. Evan's face lit up with smug satisfaction, like he'd always known he'd win. Linda exhaled in relief. "Thank you," she said, genuinely grateful not for fairness, but for convenience. I didn't respond. I pulled my suitcase from the closet and packed slowly, deliberately. Clothes folded cleanly, corners sharp, the way my mother taught me. Belt, toothbrush, shaving kit. Evan barged past and collapsed onto the bed, laughing, kicking off his flip-flops like a teenager claiming territory. When the air conditioning dipped, I could hear the ocean beneath the city noise. I could also hear my heartbeat steady, insistent. Linda lingered in the doorway, arms crossed. No apology. No offer to help, no embarrassment. "You're being dramatic," she said. "It's one night." "One night," I repeated evenly. "Sure." I zipped the suitcase, lifted it, and stepped into the hallway. The carpet felt rough under bare feet. The lights were dim, yellowed, designed to soothe. The calm felt insulting. "Where are you going?" she asked, following 2 steps behind. I turned. Evan laughed in the background. I had 100 things I wanted to say about years of being the adult in a house that rewarded cruelty, about how bending eventually becomes permanent. Instead, I said, "Somewhere with a lock." Her mouth fell open. Offense flashed across her face, not concern. Rick, I didn't wait. I walked toward the elevator, suitcase rolling behind me, the ruined doorway yawning open. Behind us, like a wound, the elevator arrived with a soft chime. I stepped inside and pressed lobby. As the door slid shut, Linda stood there in her robe, staring at me like I'd embarrassed her in public. The descent was smooth. 14:12. My phone buzzed. A text from Linda. "Don't do anything stupid." I stared at the screen. I hadn't done anything yet, but I knew, in that quiet drop, that I was finished paying for other people's peace. I also knew something colder, clearer than anger. When you kick down a door, you don't get to decide what comes next. The lobby was nearly empty, cut between night and morning. Chandeliers dimmed. A couple dozed on a sofa. Somewhere behind the desk, a printer hummed and stopped. The night clerk looked up as my suitcase wheels crossed marble. Mid-twenties, neat uniform, eyes that had already seen this story before. "Good morning, sir." I set the suitcase upright. Its weight grounded me. "I need to make a change. To my account." "Yes, sir, I need to split the folio." Effective immediately. He recalibrated without confusion. "Certainly." "Your room number? 1402? I said. "As of now, that room is no longer tied to my card." "Are you checking out?" "Yes, the remaining guests will cover their own charges." He nodded. "Understood." I watched the screen, not staring, just observing. Fields updated. Authorizations shifted. Accountability activating. "To confirm," he said, "all future incidentals and damages for room 1402 are removed from your authorization." "That's correct." He hesitated briefly. "Sir, there was I'm aware," I said. "That's why I'm here." He typed, then slid the paper across. "Please review and sign." I read every line. Times. Authorization removed. Responsibility transferred. Everything was clean and proper. I signed. When I handed the paperwork back, something loosened in my chest, not relief. Exactly. But alignment. Like a joint slipping back into the place it was always meant to be. "Thank you," the clerk said. "If you need assistance getting to the airport, I'll arrange it." I stepped outside into the warm night air. Hawaii smelled different at that hour: salt, flowers, and a faint trace of garbage drifting from somewhere unseen. The valet stand was empty, but an Uber arrived within minutes. I loaded my suitcase and slid into the back seat. As we pulled away, I looked up at the hotel. 14 floors of glass and light. Somewhere up there, my wife and her son were probably celebrating, already rewriting the story in their heads. Rick gave in. Rick always gives in. My phone buzzed again. "Linda, where are you going?" I didn't answer. The driver chatted about traffic and flight delays. I nodded at the right moments, my thoughts drifting backward through the years, like a slow re-11. At 16, slamming doors in our Fort Wayne house. Evan at 22, calling me from a county lot after his car had been impounded. Evan at 26 swearing, this time he'd pay me back. Every time, Linda said the same thing. "He's trying. He's sensitive. Don't push him." And every time, I paid with money, with silence, with dignity. The airport was quiet. A few red-eyed travelers hunched over coffee cups. A janitor pushed a mop across tiles that shone under fluorescent lights. I checked in, printed my boarding pass, and sat at the gate with my suitcase between my feet. I pulled out my notebook and wrote another line. 4:21 a.m. left property. Folio split. My phone buzzed again, voicemail. Linda's voice spilled out, tight and annoyed. "Rick, this is ridiculous. Evan's just drunk. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Call me." I turned the phone face down. When boarding began, I took a window seat. As the plane lifted off, Honolulu's lights stretched, scattered, and disappeared into black. I watched until there was nothing left to see. Somewhere over the Pacific, my phone vibrated again, another voicemail, sharper this time. "You can't just abandon us," Linda said. "You're acting like a child." I closed my eyes and breathed until the engines became a steady roar instead of pressure in my skull. My chest felt tight, not panic, but a warning, the kind you don't ignore at my age. I loosened my collar and reminded myself to drink water. By the time we landed on the mainland, I had made up my mind about one thing. I wasn't going to argue anymore. Back in Fort Wayne, the air felt heavier, cooler, familiar. After dropping my suitcase at the house, I drove straight to the credit union. The teller knew me by name and asked if I wanted my usual, "Yes, I said I need to place a temporary hold on a card." She didn't ask why. As she worked, my phone lit up again, a text. "Linda, the hotel says Evan has to pay for the door. Fix this." I stared at the message for a long moment, then slipped my phone back into my pocket and signed the form in front of me. I wasn't fixing anything anymore. I didn't go straight home. I sat in my car in the parking lot, engine off, hands resting on the wheel, letting the quiet settle. Fort Wayne was waking up, delivery trucks backing up with warning beeps, a woman unlocking the bakery across the street, steam fogging the windows. This was the part people never see. They imagine consequences as a dramatic momentous speech, a slammed door, a clean exit. But real consequences start smaller. They start with paperwork. I drove to my office instead. It was a low brick building on the edge of town, nothing fancy. I'd worked there long enough that it smelled coffee. Toner old carpet felt like muscle memory. I unlocked the door, turned on the lights, and set my suitcase beside my desk. On the wall behind me hung framed certificates most people never read. Licenses, continuing education credits. Boring things you only notice when they're missing. I sat down, opened my laptop, and pulled up the hotel reservation. Room 1402. My name, Linda's name, dates, rates, and there it was. The detail I'd already suspected. Evan wasn't on the original guest list. Linda had added him later. The timestamp showed it clearly. A late 8 hours after I'd booked the room. Most people never think about that. They assume a room is a room, a guest is a guest. It doesn't work that way. I leaned back and rubbed my eyes. This wasn't about trapping anyone. It was about understanding how responsibility actually works when things go wrong. I drafted an email to the hotel's risk management department, not angry, not accusatory. Clean. I requested preservation of security, footage and a copy of the incident report related to room 1402 during the early morning hours. One attached, my confirmation number, and signed my name. Then I waited. While I waited, my phone rang. Linda. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call came in, an unfamiliar number. I answered. "This is Rick," I said. "Mr. Halverson," a man replied, carefully. "This is Daniel Ortiz, assistant manager at the Honolulu Hotel." "Yes," I said. "I'm calling to follow up regarding the incident this morning." I closed my eyes. Here it was. "We've documented the damage," he continued. "There's a question about responsibility." "Go on," I said. "The individual involved, your stepson, was not listed as a registered guest at the time of booking." I didn't interrupt. I let him continue. "That changes how we classify the incident. We wanted to confirm that you are no longer authorizing charges related to that room." "That's correct," I said. There was a pause, papers shifting on his end. "Thank you for clarifying. We'll proceed accordingly. Send me the report when it's finalized," I said. "Yes, sir." After the call ended, I stared at my desk. The grain of the wood looked darker than usual. My reflection stared back from the blank computer screen before an email notification appeared. From Risk Management, Honolulu. Subject: Incident Documentation, Room 1402. I opened it. The report was thorough. Timestamps, staff statements, damage assessments, a note about security footage showing a male subject forcing entry. No mention of provocation, no mention of a struggle, just facts. My phone buzzed again. A text from Evan. "You think you're smart? You can't just leave us like that?" I didn't respond. I forwarded the report to myself, printed a copy, and slid it into a manila folder. On the tab, I wrote one word: Hawaii. I wasn't enjoying. That's what people always misunderstand. There was no rush, no satisfaction, only a steady, uncomfortable sense of things lining up whether I wanted them to or not. I thought about calling Linda, smoothing it over, explaining how we could fix this together. I thought about how easy it would be to step back into my old role, the one who absorbs the damage, so everyone else can pretend nothing happened. Then I thought about the door, the sound it made when it broke, the way Linda had looked past me, instead of at me, a small I'd felt standing in my own room, like I needed permission to exist. Another email came in from the credit card company. Authorization removed. No further charges permitted. Cleaned out. My phone rang again. "Linda." I answered this time. "What did you do?" she demanded, skipping hello. "I did exactly what I said I would," I replied. "They're saying Evan has to pay for everything," she said. "The door, the security, response, everything. He doesn't have that kind of money. That's not my problem," I said, surprised by how easily the words came out. "You're punishing him." "No," I said. "I'm stopping." She went quiet, her breathing fast and shallow. "You always do this?" she said finally. "You hide behind paperwork?" I looked at the folder on my desk, the dates, the neat lines. "I hide behind the truth," I said. "There's a difference." She hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone in my hand. I wasn't angry or triumphant. Tired of paying to keep the peace. Tired of explaining basic respect to a grown man. tired of being told that silence meant weakness. I closed the folder and slid it into a drawer. This wasn't over. I could feel the ripples. Church, community, the places where stories grow legs. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to stop them. The phone rang just after 6 that evening while I stood in my kitchen staring at the refrigerator without really seeing it. I'd been home less than an hour. My suitcase still sat by the door, like it didn't trust me to stay. Linda's name lit up the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "What now?" I asked Slat, neither sharp nor gentle. Her voice came through thin and tight. "Rick, we have a problem." "We've had a problem for a long time," I said. "This is different," she rushed. Evan's freaking out. "Hotel says—" "I know what the hotel says." A pause. I pictured her pacing that hotel room in Hawaii, one hand on her hip, the other clutching her phone like it might save her. "They're treating it like vandalism," she said. "Not a guest incident. They're saying his name wasn't on the original booking." "That's because it wasn't," I said. "You knew?" she snapped. "I knew how it would be classified." I said. "I didn't decide it." She exhaled hard. "Rick, he was drunk. He didn't mean to. He kicked a door in at 3 in the morning." I said. "That's not a misunderstanding." Before she could reply, another voice cut in, louder and closer. "Put me on," Evan said. There was a scuffle, Linda protesting, then Evan's breathing filled my ear. Fast, angry, too close. "You think you're clever?" he said, running away, locking accounts. "You can't do this to me." "I didn't do anything to you," I said. "You left us. You humiliated us." I waited. Silence, used properly, is a tool. "You owe me," he continued, voice rising. "You married my mom? You signed up for this?" I glanced at the clock above the stove, the second hand ticking steadily. "Evan," I said, "do you know what the cameras show?" He laughed, sharp and brittle. "What cameras?" "You told him what happened?" I said. "Yes," he said. "You told him," I repeated. The laughter cut off abruptly. "They show you standing alone in the hallway," I continued. "They show you kicking the door. They show no one laying a hand on you." There was another pause, longer than the last. "That's not he," began. "And the incident report notes that you weren't a registered guest," I said, "which changes how responsibility is assigned." "You're threatening me," he said. "No," I replied. "I'm informing you." Linda's voice slipped back onto the line. "Brittle, Rick, please." He didn't understand what he was doing. Can you help us straighten this out?" That word again. Help. I closed my eyes and felt the day's weight settle heavily across my shoulders. I thought about the emails already sent, the forms already signed, the way the process was, moving now without my hands guiding it. "There's something else," I said. Linda fell silent. "I've seen this pattern before," I went on. "Someone drinks, something breaks. Then there's a story about being pushed, attacked, or losing something valuable. A claim follows. The paperwork gets complicated." Evan exploded. "You accusing me of fraud?" "I'm saying I won't be part of anything that even looks like it," I said. "Not with my name on the booking, not with my career." Linda inhaled sharply. "Rick, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about protecting myself," I said. "Because I won't lie for this." Evan cursed. Something slammed, maybe a chair, maybe a door. Linda started crying, sharp and sudden. "You're tearing this family apart?" she said through it. I felt the familiar pull in my chest, the instinct to soften, to apologize, to fix the feeling. Instead of the problem, I'd followed that instinct for years. "No," I said quietly. "I'm stopping it from tearing me apart." Evan shouted, something I couldn't make out. Then the line went dead. I stood there long after the call ended, phone pressed to my ear. The kitchen felt unnaturally quiet. Even the refrigerator's hum sounded loud and intrusive. Almost immediately, my phone buzzed again, an email from Mercer Legal Services. Subject, notice of intent. I opened it slowly. Thin language. Vague phrasing. A threat without teeth, yet full of accusations, abandonment, financial harm, emotional distress. I read it once, then again. My pulse picked up not fear exactly, but that old professional alertness resurfacing. This was familiar ground. Bluster before substance. I forwarded the email to my work account and filed it under the Hawaii folder. Then I sat at the table and stared at the wood grain until it stopped swimming. Clear as throat. This was the moment when things could still go either way. I could call Linda back, offer to cover part of the damages, smooth the edges. I could make everything quieter, but quiet always came at a cost. I opened my notebook and wrote one more line. 6:42 p.m. Legal. Threat received, no response sent. I capped the pen and set it down. Outside, the Fort Wayne sky faded into that dull Midwest gray, the kind that settles in for the night without ceremony. Somewhere down the block, a garage door rattled shut. Normal life continuing on. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clear. And clarity, I was learning, was far more dangerous than anger. By the time Linda and Evan flew back from Hawaii, The story had already started circulating without them. That's how it works in a place like Fort Wayne. You don't have to tell anyone anything. You just stop correcting them, and the truth finds its own shoes. I learned that the morning after they landed, while I stood in the coffee aisle at Major, staring at a wall of brands all promising the same thing. When I heard my name, Ricard's turned. It was Paul Hendris from church, late 60s, retired machinist. We'd sat 3 pews apart for years without ever exchanging more than a nod. "Morning," I said. He nodded back, his eyes gentle but curious. "Linda's back," as I said. "Late last night." He hesitated, and that pause told me everything. "Rough trip?" he asked. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the folded incident report, and handed it to him. I didn't explain. I didn't add context. I let the paper speak for itself. He read slowly, jaw tightening not with anger, but recognition. "Huh," he said at last. "Well, that's something." He handed it back. "Sorry you had to deal with that." "Thank you," I said. That was all. No gossip, no judgment, just acknowledgement. By noon, I received a text from a number I hadn't seen in years. "You did the right thing. Marcio VFW Auxiliary." That evening, Linda came home. She dropped her suitcase in the hallway and stood there like the house didn't recognize her. It was clean, quiet exactly as I'd left it. "We need to talk," she said. "We can," I replied, "after dinner." She scoffed. "You're acting like this is normal." I really looked at her then, tired, worn, older than she'd looked in Hawaii. "This is normal," I said. "What happened there wasn't—" She followed me into the living room, arms crossed tight against her chest. "Do you know what people are saying?" she asked. "I know what the paper says," I answered. "That's enough." "You embarrassed us?" she said. "The church board called. They asked about the travel fund." That was new. Something clicked coldly in my chest. "What travel fund?" I asked. She hesitated, eyes flicking toward the window. "The youth retreat fund," she said finally. "Some of it was used for the Hawaii trip, temporarily. Evan was supposed to pay it back." I sat down slowly. "How much?" She shook her head. "Rick, don't do this." "How much?" I repeated. 4,000? She whispered. I exhaled, slow and steady. "And whose name was on that account?" I asked. She didn't need to answer. "Mine." I stood, walked to the desk, and opened the Hawaii folder. I laid the incident report on the table between us. "I'm not covering this," I said. Her face collapsed. "You're leaving me to deal with all of it." "No," I said. "I'm letting you deal with it." She cried then loud, shaking sobs that used to undo me. "Not this time." I slept in the guest room that night. The bed was smaller, the pillow faintly scented with detergent and dust. I slept anyway. The next day, the consequences spread outward. Evan's employer contacted Linda about his conduct during company leave. A rumor surfaced at the diner about a vacation incident. The church scheduled an emergency meeting about the fund. I didn't attend. Instead, I waited. Thursday afternoon brought an email from the downtown mediation center. Mandatory attendance requested. Linda had initiated it. I printed the message and added it to the folder. That evening, there was a knock at the door. Tom Willis, my neighbor 2 houses down, stood there holding a 6-pack of root beer. "Figured you might need company," he said. We sat on the porch as the sun sank, saying very little, watching streetlights blink on. "You okay?" he asked eventually. "I am," I said, realizing it was true. He nodded. "Sometimes stopping is the hardest thing." I glanced at the front door, solid, locked. I thought about the one in Hawaii, how easily it had broken. I knew the next step would be public. I knew it would hurt, but I also knew something else. I wasn't alone anymore. The mediation room smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet, a place designed to make people talk without feeling important. It was on the 2nd floor of a brick building across from the courthouse. A faded flag standing. In the corner, I arrived 10 minutes early, not strategy, just habit. I set my folder square with the table's edge, notebook to the right, Parker pen resting on top. When life starts bending out of shape, straight lines help. Linda entered first, dressed like she was interviewing Navy Blazier, low heels, hair pulled tight. Her eyes flicked to the folder, then away. Evan followed. Late, shoulders hunched, like he was already bracing for impact. Wrinkled button-down, scuffed sneakers. He avoided my gaze and dropped into his chair, arms crossed. The mediator introduced herself, outlined the rules, asked for respect. I listened. Evan didn't. "Let's just say it," he snapped before she finished. He abandoned us. He locked us out of money. He humiliated us in Hawaii and back home. "This is what this is about." The mediator turned to me. "Mr. Halverson." I didn't answer immediately. I opened my folder, revealing copies, the incident report, the time-stamped folio change, email confirmations, and the printed statement from the hotel manager. I laid each document out carefully, one by one, making everything visible. "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I'm here to clarify what happened." Evan laughed, a sharp and unpleasant sound. "You think waving papers? Iran makes you right." I looked at him reality. Sweat was already on his forehead. his jaw working like he wanted to bite through the tension in the room. Let's start with the timeline, I said, sliding the first page forward. 3:07 a.m., I continued. Security footage shows Evan in the hallway outside room 1402. He kicks the door. The door breaks inward. No one else touches it. Evan shifted in his chair. I'm not finished, I said calmly. The mediator raised a hand toward Evan, who scoffed, but leaned back. 3:09. I went on. The front desk receives a noise complaint from another guest. 3:13. Security arrives. 3:15. The damage is documented. I paused. 3:17. I added. I exit the room with my suitcase. Linda stared at the table. I slid the next page forward. This is the guest registration, I explained. My name, Linda's name, original booking time. Evan's name is not here. That doesn't mean anything, Evan snapped. It means everything, I said, turning to the mediator. Responsibility follows registration. He wasn't a registered guest at the time of entry. I moved the next document forward. This is the incident report. It classifies the damage as vandalism by an unregistered individual, not an accident by a guest. That's not my wording. Evan stood so fast his chair scraped across the floor. You're doing this on purpose, he shouted. You planned this. You wanted me to get screwed. The mediator stood. Sir, please sit down. You ruined my life, Evan yelled, pointing at me. You could have paid, you always paid. The room went quiet. That sentence hung heavier than anything else he'd said. I looked at him, then back at the papers. No, I said. I didn't ruin your life. I closed the folder and folded my hands on top of it. I stopped paying for your mistakes. Evan opened his mouth, then closed it. His face flushed red. There's a difference, I added, keeping my voice steady. I didn't lean forward. I let the words settle. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. The mediator cleared her throat. Mr. Mercer, there's also a statement from the hotel staff regarding your account of events. She picked up a page from her stack and read aloud. The guests attempted to reframe the incident as a physical altercation. Review of footage did not support this claim. They're lying. Evan laughed too loudly. The mediator continued. Further, the guests requested documentation for a personal claim unrelated to the property damage. Linda looked up sharply. What claim? It's nothing, Evan said, spinning toward her. I finally looked at Linda. This is what I meant, I said. This is why I stepped away. Evan slammed his fist on the table. You think you're better than me? You think you're some hero because you write things down? No, I said. I think you've never had to live with the consequences of what you do. That's not true, he shouted. Then sit down and listen, the mediator said, firmly. Evan dropped back into his chair, breathing hard. I opened my notebook and read the last line I had written. 6:42 p.m. legal threat received. No response sent. I looked at Evan. I didn't retaliate. I didn't attack you. I didn't spread rumors. I looked at Linda. I stopped lying. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't come here to win, I said. I came here to be done. The mediator nodded slowly. Based on the documentation. Responsibility for the damages rests with Mr. Mercer. Mr. Halverson is not obligated to cover these costs. Evan let out a stringlet sound, somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Linda whispered. Rick stood. This is where my involvement ends, I said. Financially, legally, emotionally. I picked up my folder and notebook, slid the pen into my pocket, and walked toward the door. Evan shouted after me. Do you think this makes you strong? I paused, hand on the handle. I didn't turn around. I think it makes me free, I said. Then I opened the door and stepped into the hallway, leaving the noise behind me. The house felt different after the mediation, not empty. Not cleaner, like a room after furniture has been moved, and the dust has settled enough to see the floor. Linda didn't come home that night. She texted that she was staying with a friend from church. I replied simply, okay. No argument, no follow-up. I put my phone face down on the table and left it there. In the days that followed, I did what I had always done best. I made lists, separated accounts, closed authorizations, and canceled automatic payments. I didn't rush. I didn't drag it out. I treated my marriage like a complicated audit, methodical, respectful, honest about what was no longer viable. When Linda and I finally talked, it wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no accusations, just two people realizing the same truth, from opposite ends of the table. I don't know who you are anymore, she said quietly. I do, I said. That was the moment we both understood there was no fixing this. You can repair a door, I added, but you can't repair a boundary once it's been crossed and denied. The divorce was clean. No court theatrics, no revenge spending. Just signatures, dates, and a final transfer that felt more like relief than loss. Evan never spoke to me again. I didn't reach out a few weeks later. I sat with my retirement planner, the same man I'd been seeing for years, same office, same framed photos of his kids on the desk. Yeah, he said, tapping his calculator. You could step back earlier than we planned. How much earlier? I asked. He smiled. 4 Maybe 5 years? I thought about that. 5 years of mornings without tension? 5 years without waiting for the next crisis? 5 years bought, not with overtime or luck, but with the simple, this isn't a stop paying for chaos. On a quiet Sunday morning, I sat in my living room with a cup of black coffee, the kind I'd always told myself was too expensive. The house was silent, save for the soft tick of the wall clock. Outside, Fort Wayne moved at its usual pace. Lawns mowed, a dog barking 2 houses down, a delivery truck idling at the corner. I looked at my front door solid, undamaged, locked the way a door should be. For years, I had confused peace with endurance, thinking being a good man meant absorbing everything and smiling through it. I was wrong. Peace has a cost. So does silence. The difference is, who pays it? That if this story strikes a nerve, if you've ever been told to just let it go while someone keeps testing your boundaries, remember this. You're allowed to stop. You're allowed to close the door. You don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing your own dignity. If more people need to hear this, share it with someone caring too much in silence. And if you want more stories like this about quiet, strength, hard choices, and the long road back to self-respect, consider subscribing and staying a while. Sometimes, the bravest thing a man can do isn't fighting back. It's stepping away and refusing to pay anymore.